All right. How I write in different time periods is today's video. Before we begin, I want to thank you for subscribing. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for being a friend. I want to thank you for watching 30 seconds or more of each advertisement as it comes up. Appreciate that. That's how we get paid here. I want to thank you for whatever you're doing today or tomorrow or you did yesterday. Thank you. All right, all that being said, how I write in different time periods. So one time I traveled back to the 1800s. No, that's not what this is about. It's not about my time traveling missions. It's about writing in different time periods. Okay, not physically being in those time periods. I don't know if you figured that out or if you were like coming to this one going, "Oh my god, this guy's a time traveler. We're going to find out what it's like writing in the 1700s." This guy's writing books while dinosaurs are roaming the earth in the 1200s. I don't know when the dinosaurs, whatever year that was. Um, I don't write a ton of stuff, to be honest with you. Even though I've been doing this for almost 40 years and 15 years as a full time author, I don't write a ton of period pieces, historical fiction, whatever you want to call it. Probably the furthest back I will go is the 1960s. I was born in November of 1969, so I know what 6 weeks of the 60s. But um, I've done a lot of research, so that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to it's the write what you know thing, but not write what you know because you've lived it and all that. Write what you know because you've researched it. Write what you know because you've done the work. So behind me, all these books, a lot of these books, like one, two, three full shelves of these books are research books, writing books. Okay, could be how to write a crime thriller, how to write a romance, how to write comic books, how to write a screenplay, whatever. I buy all of those books, love them. I've even read a few of them, and there's a few books there that I have used over the years extensively. When I was writing fantasy books, okay, even though you're creating your own fantasy world, you got to set it something, that's similar. So obviously the Middle Ages. So I have a couple of writing books in the Middle Ages. I have a couple, actually, I have several books, 4 or 5 of those, writing westerns or life in the 1800s. Okay, Writer's Digest used to put out these books. Life in the Middle Ages, life in the 1800s, life during Prohibition, those types of. I have all of them. Love them. Okay. A lot of the information is still good. I mean, yeah, I mean these were put out way before the internet and all that stuff. But the information doesn't change. Just because we have the internet now doesn't mean that suddenly rot gut alcohol in the wild wild west means a different thing. No, all that information is still good. So I'll use those. I used to just use those books before the internet. I would, um, I would read other books. So I was born in Newark, New Jersey, and I've written several crime thriller stories over the years set in Newark, New Jersey, but not like 2000, 2026 Newark. No, I want like the 70s. I want the gritty stuff. You know what I mean? So I've written those. So how? Well, I've read the history. I've read several history books of Newark, which I have on my shelf. It's over on this one. And that's it. And then you also, if you're writing in different time periods, you really have to be up on specifically what part of the country, because every part of the country is going to have a little different. We're going to have a little different twang in the words. We're going to have places where it's soda, places where it's Coke, places where it's pop. A sub is a hoagie, is a grinder, is on and on and on. Okay, so you got to learn all of those things, and then you have to learn. Well, did they call it a Coke in the 1920s? Probably. So you got to do all that research as well. Okay, to make your story as authentic as possible. There's nothing worse than reading a story that you could tell the person did absolutely no research and the person had no idea what that time period was like. Years ago, days of old, I used to edit Black Moon magazine. I've done a video on it already. Pause this. Go watch the Black Moon magazine one, and me in zine culture. And I don't know how many times I got stories. And again, this is before the internet. This is mid 90s. Um, I remember I had a book came out, an anthology I did, Florida horror, not those red ones that the guy ripped everybody off, but an original one. I'm sure I have a copy up there somewhere. And a guy sent me a story. I think it was a guy. Could have been me. We'll call it the writer. A writer sent me a story for that one. And it started off where it was snowing in Orlando. And it wasn't like, oh my God, it's snowing in Florida. This never happens kind of thing. It was, yeah, just another winter day in Orlando with 4 feet of snow on the ground. I got to go out and shovel. Do your research, okay? Another story where I don't know if it was a young kid. I don't know. I read a story where they were talking about the 1930s, 1940s, somewhere around there, somewhere in that range, and the guy pulled out a cell phone. And I'm like, unless this is some kind of slipstream fantasy, whatever, why are you setting it in the 1930s, 1940s, and the guy has a cell phone? It doesn't make any sense. So just those are big common sense, really, common sense mistakes. But what you really have to do is figure out, things were different. Way too many times we're watching movies and we're watching period pieces, and every woman is this kick-ass, says what she wants to say, scares everybody, fierce warrior type person, blah blah blah. And then the reality is what? The reality is that women were suppressed for a long time. Women weren't allowed to vote. Women were, the old awful cliche of, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Like, that was the mentality. Okay? And 100% I'm saying it was awful and it's wrong, and I'm glad we are not there, but we were there. Okay? So there's things you have to think about. Listen, I'm an old white man. So I can't, from personal experience, I can't tell you what being a person of color, being a black person, being an Asian, being Hispanic in the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, on and on, okay? But I can do enough research to make my story believable enough that if I have those characters, those people in my story as characters, I can hopefully understand the general idea at the time, okay? If you're going to write a story about the South, you're going to write a story with an African American character. We're in the 1940s, 1950s, okay? First off, they're not African Americans, they're black people, okay? That's not derogatory. That's just what they said back there. I was born in the 60s. So you have to, and I'm on a slippery slope here. I know I'm not trying to say anything off. I'm just trying to prove a point. I don't even know what the damn point is at this point. do the research, understand the time period, understand what was happening in the world then. You know, who was the president? Who was the what was the big thing? Are we in the Cold War? Are you writing about World War I, World War II? Are you writing about the Revolutionary War? What are we talking about? Okay. And where was the world then? So you can't just throw a year on a story and go, okay, yeah, good enough. Yeah, you know what? People will figure it out. No, you have to really do the research. And I'm lazy. A lot of times I'm just gonna set it now. Okay. Because I don't want to do all that research. It's a short story and I don't want to do all that research because I don't think I need to know what these characters were like in 1912. I think the story would best be served if the characters were just here and now. That's the way I feel on things. I also understand that history repeats itself, okay? I'm not going to get into politics and all that other stuff. I just will say if you do not live in a cave, you know that crazy stuff has been happening for not it's not like, oh, it started last week. It's been happening for years, okay? And how will 2026 how will that affect fiction 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years from now? If you're setting it, your time period is 2026, okay? We've had a lot of stories about 9/11. We've had a lot of stories about COVID. We've had a lot of stories about other things, big things that have happened in this world. And it's easy to write them now. But what about future generations when they want to set a story, um, in one of the buildings during 9/11, for instance? Well, we can figure it out now. It happened 25 years ago. Okay, the bulk of us that were alive then understand repercussions, what happened, what followed, what things in this world changed. Okay, so if you're writing a character that's going to sneak a bomb or a weapon onto a plane because they're like, say they're an assassin and they're flying to Belize and they got to go kill somebody. And this story is set in 2003, 2004, 2001, 2002. There's no way that person is getting that weapon on the plane. Okay? Because we were overcompensating at that point. We were going a little nutty about every little shampoo bottle and everything else. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying we went far off to one side on that stuff. So your fiction should show that, okay? Because somebody reading that is going to go, wait a minute, it's 6 months after the 9/11 attacks. How is this person able to break down an automatic weapon and put it in socks in their suitcase or on their carry-on? And it doesn't make any sense, okay? Um, and also, for me, conversations, things that we say now or we've said, you don't want to set a story in, uh, you know, the 1700s. Hey, I'm writing a story about, I don't know, George Washington, and George Washington keeps saying groovy or something, or yo man, what are you doing? That kind, any of those things. When did those specific words and phrasings, when did that start? And you can look it up now. You can figure it out. And that's the other part of it, I think, is when you're doing dialogue. Yeah, I read a really good short story not too long ago. I don't remember what anthology it was in, but the two guys are talking, and it's like the end of the 1960s. It's like January 1970 kind of thing, and they are a couple dudes hanging out in San Francisco, couple of ex hippies kind of thing, and they're still using a lot of the groovy, and they're using a lot of the words that people would use then. They're reciting lyrics of songs that were popular then. They're talking about heading up to the Fillmore and going and seeing Led Zeppelin. I think that was a part of the story too. I don't remember what the story is. I don't remember many things. All I do remember is the person who wrote that story had either lived that in 1970 or they did some phenomenal research. I probably should have looked up the author immediately and figured out how old this author was. And, this author would have obviously had to be in their late 60s, 70s, something like that, if they lived it. Otherwise, it would be like me going, I'm going to write a story set in 1970. Let me do some research. And research isn't just, let me hit Wikipedia and let me see. Or let me use Google, now that Google is pretty much just AI. And anything you look up, there's always the caveat of, oh, this might not be the right information. It's a lot of times now it's no longer the right information, which is ridiculous. Hoo-ah. You gotta do the research, and that's what I always try to do. I don't need to pepper a story or especially a book with a ton of information. Okay. I don't want I don't want every page to be Quint's speech about the Indianapolis in Jaws. One of the greatest moments in any movie, all movie. Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. And that scene is amazing, but you don't need that scene in every chapter. You don't need all of that in a book that would be an info drop. You know what I mean? Kind of deal. You don't need all that. I'm happy if your story is set in 1965 Newark or Los Angeles, whatever. During the riots, okay, is a great example. I wrote a short story during the riots. My parents lived in Newark. They both grew up in Newark, New Jersey. My mother lived in the projects. They were like one of the few in her building. I think they were the white people. Okay, so she got that firsthand look of that of the riots and all that, and then as a kid worried, like 14, 15 years old, whatever she was back then, of, am I in trouble? Am I gonna get hurt? Because we got a riot going on here. So that was kind of the mentality. So regardless of race or anything else, you have to figure out all the players in that story and what they what would they succumb to, where they're, and you don't have to make it stereotypical. you know uh, Not everybody is, if you're, oh, I was the characters, it's 1965 and we're set in Newark. Not every street in Newark had a riot on it. You know what I mean? um so you just got to look at it and make those smart decisions about how much of this history am I gonna pepper into this story. How much of this is gonna be where people go, okay, he did his research, or maybe this guy was there, maybe he knows somebody, he got to sit down with somebody, and that's kind of the attitude. Okay, so look at it that way. Do the research, or then don't write the story there. That's how I write different time periods. I probably do more research time wise than I am writing the story. I'm also finding little tidbits here and there as I'm doing research that I'm not going to use in the story, but I put back in my giant head, and I think, you know what? Someday I'm going to write something, and that is going to pop back up. I'm going to go, hey, remember that about whatever animal went extinct? What year was that again? Because I want to write something around that time, like that kind of thing. So you got to look at it. You got to look at it that way. If I've offended anybody during this 20 minutes or so, Armand's opinion. Take it with all with a grain of salt. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching all my videos every Wednesday, every Sunday, and occasional Friday. And that's it. All right. Thanks for watching.